Hey Flag fans, I'm Gray, and this is Flag Facts. Today's show is going to be a bit of a long one, so buckle up, because it's time to learn everything you need to know about the flag of America's peach state, Georgia. Georgia is a state in the southeastern region of the country and is surrounded by Tennessee and North Carolina to the north, South Carolina to the east, Florida to the south, and Alabama to the west. By size, Georgia is the 24th largest state, and with a population of around 11 million people, it comes in as the 8th most populated state in the country. While Georgia was one of the 13 original American colonies and the 4th to ratify the U.S. Constitution in 1788, it did not fly an official state flag until 1879. Here it is, the first official state flag of Georgia. The design consists of 2 horizontal red stripes and 1 white stripe, which are perpendicular to a vertical blue stripe on the left. And if you're thinking that the design looks a lot like the national flag of the Confederate States of America, known as the Stars and Bars, well, that's not a coincidence. The design was introduced by a state senator named Herman Perry, who was a former soldier in the Confederate Army, and most likely based his design on the Stars and Bars. During the American Civil War, Georgia seceded from the Union and joined the Confederate States of America. Fun fact, Georgia was actually the last of the Confederate states to be readmitted to the Union, and it did not do so until July 15, 1870, more than 5 full years after the end of the Civil War in 1865. Perry's design went unchanged until 1902, when the Georgia General Assembly decided that the flag should also include the state coat of arms on the blue field on the left. The Georgia state coat of arms featured an arch with 3 columns. The arch represents the state's constitution, and the 3 columns represent the 3 branches of government: legislative, executive, and judicial. The columns also feature a ribbon with the words of the official state motto: wisdom, justice, and moderation. Finally, in between the second and third columns is a man standing with a drawn sword. Unfortunately for Georgia, there was actually no standard way to display the coat of arms, and as a result, a variety of different flags were manufactured and flown over the next several years. Some used only the coat of arms on the blue background, while others displayed the coat of arms on a gold-outlined white shield above a red ribbon containing the state's name. The year 1799 was also added to indicate the year that the state seal was adopted, though the date was later changed to 1776 to reflect the year of American independence. By the 1920s, a design emerged that included the entire state seal instead of just the coat of arms, and that pretty much became the standard until the flag was officially redesigned in 1956. And oh boy, did they make some changes. In 1955, the state Democratic Party chairman, John Sammons Bell, proposed a new design for the Georgia state flag that would prominently incorporate the Confederate Battle Flag. Legislation to change the flag was soon introduced to the Assembly by State Senator Willis Hardin and another state senator, whose name really says it all, Jefferson Lee Davis. The bill passed and the new design was adopted on February 13, 1956. Here it is, the second official state flag of Georgia. At this point, you might have a couple questions. Questions like, why did they redesign the flag? I thought it was already based on the Confederate flag. What's the difference between the Confederate Battle Flag and the Stars and Bars? Who names their kid Jefferson Lee Davis? All reasonable questions. But first, let's start with the Confederate flag. This was the national flag of the Confederate States of America, and it is known as the Stars and Bars. And remember, this was the design that inspired Georgia's first state flag. This, on the other hand, is the Confederate Battle Flag, not the national flag. As the story goes, the Confederate Battle Flag was born out of necessity following the Battle of Bull Run. Legend has it that amidst the smoke and general chaos of the battle, it was difficult to distinguish the Stars and Bars of the Confederacy from the Stars and Stripes of the Union Army. To remedy this problem, the Confederate battle flag was introduced, and it was this design that was now featured on the Georgia state flag. So why did Georgia redesign the flag? Well, racism. And don't just take my word for it, that was the conclusion of an official report from the Senate Research Office of the Georgia State Senate, published in the year 2000. Link in the description. The report, which discusses the flag and its historical context in great detail, does not mince words, stating that when the battle flag was incorporated into the Georgia state flag, the state was in a desperate situation to preserve segregation. Resisting, avoiding, undermining, and circumventing integration was the 1956 General Assembly's primary objective. The adoption of the battle flag was an integral, albeit small, part of this resistance. So now for some oversimplified context. While the end of the Civil War in 1865 did bring an end to slavery, it did not, by any measure, put an end to racism, and the practice of racial segregation could be found all across the country in both the South and the North. Fast forward to the 1950s, and the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People was working hard to challenge segregation laws in public schools. This ultimately led to the landmark 1954 Brown v. Board of Education decision, in which the Supreme Court unanimously ruled that racial segregation in public schools was unconstitutional. And with that in mind, we head back to Georgia. At this time, Georgia was seen as one of the leading voices in the resistance to integration, and Governor Marvin Griffin's 1956 State of the State address paints a pretty clear picture of just how seriously they embraced that charge, stating, "There will be no mixing of the races in the public schools and college classrooms of Georgia, anywhere or at any time as long as I am governor. All attempts to mix the races, whether they be in the classrooms, on the playgrounds, in public conveyances, or in any other area of close personal contact on terms of equity, peril the Moors of the South." The tragic decision of the United States Supreme Court on May 17, 1954, poses a threat to the unparalleled harmony and growth that we have attained here in the South. Georgia even went so far as to consider taking all of their public schools private to avoid integration. They passed legislation to maintain segregation in parks, golf courses, swimming pools, and intrastate transportation facilities. They even passed a law that would revoke the retirement benefits of any police officer who failed to enforce segregation laws. And the list could go on, but the point is, the preservation of white supremacy in the state of Georgia was an obvious and outspoken objective. With this in mind, we head back to the question from earlier. Why change the flag if it already contained Confederate imagery? Well, time for some more context. While the argument could certainly be made that any symbol of the Confederacy is inherently tied to racism, many have also argued that Confederate symbols are simply signs of Southern pride and heritage, and can be used to honor Confederate veterans. Setting aside which interpretation you subscribe to, it can undeniably be said that the Confederate battle flag became the flag of choice for white supremacist groups such as the Ku Klux Klan and hardline segregationists like the Dixiecrats. So when John Sammons Bell, a vociferous supporter of segregation, proposed his flag design in the wake of the Brown decision, the meaning was easily understood. Representative James McCay, a member of the 1956 Assembly who actually voted against changing the flag, perhaps explained it best, saying that there was only one reason for putting that flag on there. Like the gun rack in the back of a pickup truck, it telegraphs a message. And McCay was not the only voice of opposition to the new design. In fact, many Confederate organizations themselves opposed the battle flag's inclusion. The Ladies' Memorial Association called it a backward step. The John B. Gordon Camp of the Sons of Confederate Veterans stated that it was against all uses of the battle flag except in commemoration of the Confederacy or by the official use of the Daughters of the Confederacy, the Sons of the Confederacy, and the Children of the Confederacy. And the United Daughters of the Confederacy said that the battle flag of the Confederacy is a flag of sacred memory and belongs to no one state, and placing it on the Georgia flag will cause strife. That said, opposition was not widespread, no public hearings were held, and little was written about it in the press. Bell's design was indeed adopted, and the message was clear. Governor Griffin's floor leader, Representative Denmark Groover, said that the new flag would have a deep meaning in the hearts of all true Southerners, and that it would show that we in Georgia intend to uphold what we stood for, will stand for, and will fight for. Despite the controversy surrounding the flag, it did stick around for the next several decades. Over the years, there were a number of efforts to ditch the design, but success was hard to come by. Perhaps the most significant push came in the 1990s, when Governor Zell Miller publicly advocated for changing the flag, but ultimately backed down after facing a massive opposition that nearly cost him his re-election. Finally, in 2001, Governor Roy Barnes once again took up the matter and introduced a new design for the state flag. And with a little help from none other than Denmark Groover, the flag was narrowly approved. Groover, now 78 and in failing health, admitted in a speech that the 1956 flag had indeed been adopted as a way to protest integration, and that it was time to put the old flag to rest. And thus, the third official state flag of Georgia was adopted, and everyone lived happily ever after. Just kidding, everyone hated it. The new flag was based on a design created by architect Cecil Alexander and featured the Georgia state seal on a field of blue. Surrounding the seal were 13 white, 5-pointed stars, and below the seal was a ribbon containing 5 postage stamp-sized flags, and the words, Georgia's History. From left to right, the flags were the Betsy Ross American flag, an unofficial Georgia flag from 1861, the circa 1920s state flag, the 1956 state flag, and the current 50-star US flag. And finally, below the ribbon, were the words, In God We Trust. From the start, the new flag was pretty much universally disliked. Supporters of the 1956 flag were outraged. The Georgia State Senate Minority Leader said it looked like a Denny's placemat. The North American Vexillological Association rated it as the worst designed state or provincial flag in all of North America, and many in the general public were upset that the design was approved without public input. Some critics even started calling the flag Barnes's rag, and the flag debate became a major issue in the 2002 general election, in which Barnes was running for a second term, an election which he lost. His challenger, Republican Sonny Perdue, had campaigned on the idea that Georgians should have a chance to vote on their state flag, and now that he was in office, Perdue had to figure what exactly the people were going to vote on. In February 2003, a proposal was introduced to the Assembly to hold a referendum on the flag that had been adopted in 2001. Voters would be asked whether or not they wanted to keep the current flag, but if the current flag was rejected, they would also be asked to indicate whether or not they wanted to return to the pre-1956 flag or the 1956 flag. Although the referendum would be non-binding, Black members of the General Assembly objected to any scenario that could potentially bring the 1956 flag back, and in April, an amended version of the proposal was introduced along with an entirely new design for the Georgia flag. Here it is, the bold new design of the Georgia state. Hang on. Isn't that just the first national flag of the Confederacy with the Georgia coat of arms and the words, In God We Trust stamped on it? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it certainly is. While the new flag did not get any points for its originality, it did manage to garner enough support to pass the House. That said, there were still a few problems. During the consideration of the bill, no public hearings were held, and as such, no flag experts were consulted. This, as you may have guessed, introduced some problems. Perhaps none more glaring than the fact that the proposed flag would be longer than most standard flags. How much longer, you ask? Well, on indoor flagpoles, it would touch the ground, and on outdoor poles, it would extend 2 feet beyond the US flag. Nonetheless, the design made its way to the Senate, where its awkward dimensions were addressed, and after much debate, it was officially adopted. Upon the governor's signature, the flag immediately replaced the Barnes's flag from 2001, albeit with the condition that the public would vote on the design in a statewide referendum in March of 2004. The design was overwhelmingly selected over the Barnes's flag, receiving 73% of the vote, thus ending the great Georgia flag debate. And there you go. That's everything you need to know about the Georgia state flag. So what'd you think? Is it a good design? Is it time for another revision? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're down there, be sure to like and subscribe for more flag-related content just like this. If you're in the market for a Georgia flag, or any other flag, head on over to FlagandBanner.com for all your flag flying needs. If you want to dive even deeper into the history of the Georgia flag, check out the links in the description below. And as always, thank you for watching. We'll catch you next time on Flag Facts.